So the last time I was down here messing around with the outboard motor, I discovered that there are some rubber collars that were missing, so I couldn't mount the starter. Well, I went online and I found several companies on eBay and other places selling the two rubber collars as a set of two. And the funny thing is, there's a seller, I think, on eBay, and he's selling the two collars for $20. Now, that might include shipping, but I mean, shipping on the two rubber collars is going to be like negligible. So, anyways, I think I actually found that the original parts is still available. So, before I go through the trouble of ordering and paying shipping, I figured, you know what, I'm going to call my nearest Mercury distributor, parts distributor. Got a big boat place out here that's a Mercury place, and well, it's not in town, but you know, it's only about a 20-minute drive. And I figured, well, since I was going to be out in that area anyways, I'd check and see if they had them in stock, which would be the first long shot, and second, you know, if they had them, how much they would want for them. And you know, thinking, well, it's got to be cheaper online, right? Well, no, it turns out I called this particular Mercury dealer. He was very reasonable. The first thing he noticed, you know, he's a parts guy, he's been there for years, he knows the place in and out. First thing he noticed was he's got two in stock. I was like, wow, that's all I need is two. So I got the last two. You know, he went and laid hands on them, pulled them out, and he says, oh yeah, and he said, you know, the bags are old and dirty, they've been there forever. You know, and he's basically telling me, yeah, he's pleased as punch to get rid of these. Nobody came in for him. The only thing I can surmise is that when you buy a replacement starter, that normally when you buy a replacement starter, that it comes with the collars. Either that, or everybody just keeps reusing their original collars. So the only time that you're going to be ordering those collars is in the rare situation like mine, where somebody had taken the starter out of this boat motor before I got it, lost the collars on me, and I inherited the motor with no collars. So, needless to say, he says, yeah, I got two. He says, oh, one, he says the package is open, but he says it's still a new part inside there. And the other one is this different style package here. But so I think they were like $3 and change each for these collars. And I was like, oh, this is my lucky day. I couldn't believe it, because A, I was lucky that he had just two of these left, that he had these in stock at all. B, I was lucky because he was selling them to me for probably like even a discount off the last suggested list price, because he was just happy to get rid of these old parts. So that was great. And I got these part numbers by looking at one of the online breakdowns on one of the major online suppliers. And I noticed when I was looking at the parts breakdown that in addition to the two collars, these two rubber collars, there's a little plastic spacer. And I'm like, well, obviously I don't have that either. But the plastic spacer is obsolete. So I was like, oh, great. So I went to pick up the collars, and I said to the parts guy, I said, you know, I said, try this number. And I gave him the number for the obsolete plastic spacer, and he said, yeah. He says, looks like I got one. And he comes out from the back room, and he comes out with this, the plastic spacer, the obsolete part, brand new old stock. And I'm like, wow. I said, that's great. And he said, yeah. And he even remarked, he said, yeah, you know, this is supposed to be like $7 for this stupid little piece of plastic. More money than what they want for the rubber collar, which doesn't make sense to me at all. But he said, yeah, this is supposed to be like $7 or something like that. He said, but he said, you know, you're doing me a favor getting rid of these old parts out of my inventory, because basically he can zero those out that he doesn't have them anymore. And he's not going to reorder them. So, $11 for the three parts. So I was pretty happy with that. No receipt, no tax, no nothing. $11. I'm out of there. He's happy. I'm happy. And I took his business card, and I'm going to call and ask for him by name. Well, I had to go look at a parts diagram to figure out where this plastic spacer goes, but it actually sits on top of this rubber collar up here. That makes it awful tight fit getting this thing in there, though. I guess the trick is I gotta take this bottom cover off. The other problem I have right now is I don't know how this is supposed to be oriented. There's nothing in the photo that would indicate how this goes. There's a bracket right here that I think on the original starter didn't exist, and I think because this is an aftermarket starter that fits this and several other models, I think that's the only reason that bracket exists is for that it might be used actually on another model other than this one. So I don't know if I tuck it in back that way. Well, that's going to be underneath there. Hopefully it's not used for anything, and it won't be missed. And I think I want the positive stud out this way so it can, the wire can come down here to the good old solenoid. It's a tight fit. Alright, so I guess maybe I should start looking for some bolts since some of them were missing when I got this thing. Oh, wait a minute. Ha! I just noticed this. I just noticed this right here. I bet you that's where that goes. Where that goes. It's got a square hole. I wonder if that's a carriage bolt that goes in there. Alright, let's see. If this was like this, then I'd have to spin that thing. I have to spin this thing way around. That puts this positive lead way over here on the inside over here. I don't know. That seems kind of weird to me. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like it. You know, there's a guy who's got quite a few videos of him tearing apart one of these motors and working on it, doing various things. The only problem is his videos aren't complete. What I mean is his video series isn't complete. He'll do a video and it'll be pretty in-depth and have a lot of good information, but then the next video he posted in chronological order, there'll be like a big gap of things that went on in between and no explanation as to why. So, but I do think he did have a video chronicling the removal of his starter. Maybe I should go look at that. But I tell you what, I can do. I can put this in temporarily, which is all I really want to do for now, is put it in temporarily so that I can test the compression on this thing. Wow, that's really... I can't believe how tight that is. I'm beginning to think that this plastic spacer's job is just to give something more slippery for this bracket to slide against when you're trying to put this together. Otherwise, that darn rubber would really be getting torn up by this bracket. There we go. That's about where it should be. So these brackets aren't threaded, there's just nuts on the backside, and the nuts fall out of position. See, the way this bracket's made, it's actually supposed to hold the nut from turning. But this one under here, under the flywheel, just fell out. It's tough to see it in there too. There we go, I think I just caught it. Ah, what does he need? I need a nut driver, that way I can push on this thing while I'm trying to screw it in. Well, it took a little bit of fiddling with the wiring, but I got my temporary setup here. I got my battery on the floor with a charge on it. I temporarily just laid the bracket with the starter solenoid in here, and that's wired to the starter. I got a ground, so the solenoid has to be grounded. So I'm just going to hold this wire to the case of the... Can't hold it to the chassis because the rubber bushings there might be acting... These rubber collars are probably isolating it.
Did you bring in that bench in too?
No.
Not use it?
Nah, it's too rickety. I'm going to make something better. All right. So now as soon as I touch this to 12 volts, which of course right here is the input side of the solenoid, this is going to spin up. So obviously nothing's going to happen. I've got the entire ignition system removed. I've got all the spark plugs removed, so it should spin nice and easily. So right now, I just want to be listening to hear if there's any bad metal on metal noises to be heard. Alright, well, it's not meshing properly with the flywheel. Alright. I'm just going to manually rotate this up and see whether or not I can figure out what's going on there. Well, that. Yeah, that's not good. Now, I double checked the part number on this starter today. And according to the manufacturer, this is an API starter model MOT-3005EN. And according to the manufacturer, this is a direct replacement for the part number that comes up as being the starter for the original OEM starter for this thing. But what I'm wondering is, because it looks to me like this pinion gear is not going to be right. I don't think that's meshing with that, or going to mesh with that, ever. Well, that was a waste of time wiring this all up. I don't think there's any way that that's going to work on there. Well, that's a bummer. So the spacing between these teeth seems a lot bigger than what this flywheel calls for. You can't really see it from this angle. I can't get the camera up high enough to show you looking from the top. This is a little bit better. So when I turn this, manually rotate this, this should be able to start engaging this, and it's looking like it's almost an impossibility for that to happen the way this is lining up, or not lining up, I should say. It's been a couple days since I was down here and looking at this problem with the starter, and I have done a little research and realized what the problem is. The whole problem is right here. You see this part number? MOT-3005EN. Problem is that E shouldn't be there. So if I just black out that E, it should start to work. I wish. But seriously, folks, the problem is that apparently right around the time that they were making this motor, somewhere in that era, they changed the pinion gear on the size of the pinion gear on the starter, or the design, or something. So what I did today was I called, because I looked up online and I found on Crowley Marine, I found the part number that supposedly is the part number for the original motor for this. And then I found that supposedly this is supposed to be a cross for that. But then I called this company, API, and they're not a very big company, so it's kind of nice. You can actually you don't have to go through 5 people to get a guy on the phone who's actually probably working right there in the facility. And he said, well, Lisa, what's the original part number? And I told him what I found for an original part number, and he came back and he says, yeah, he says, you need the MOT-3005N. He said the 3005EN is the version that has what they call the large pinion, and the other one has, I guess, the regular or the small pinion. And he said, interestingly enough, he said they actually are both 10 tooth, because I thought maybe there was too many teeth on this thing, because I saw some other pinions that were, like 9 tooth or 8 tooth or whatever. He said, no, they're both 10 tooth pinions, but this is a larger diameter gear. So, he said if I had bought this thing brand new and everything, he said there would be no problem. I could send it back and they could swap it out for the other one. But of course, my problem is that I bought this new old stock I think somebody had ordered this and then maybe found it didn't fit or didn't end up using it. Maybe they had the same problem I have. And so I'm kind of stuck with this starter. I have two choices now. Choice number one, well, technically I guess I have more than two. One possibility, take this starter exactly the way it is, put it back in the box, put it up on eBay and sell it. And in the meantime, buy a replacement starter. Here's the problem. This starter, the 3005N, it's pretty expensive, new. I haven't found any cheap ones on eBay from this company. I can get other cheap rebuilt starters, but even those, like the really cheap one is like $50, and anything that looks half decent is like $98. So that would mean outlaying more money. I would get some of it back by selling this, but who knows how long it's going to take to sell this one. So that's a problem. Option number two is I try and source a pinion and just change this pinion gear. The problem is, it seems like all the descriptions for the pinions just say that they're 10 tooth. They don't say what the diameter is. So I'd have a heck of a time finding them. I would find a lot of them that were exactly like this one. This apparently is the newer one. The newer style is a little bit bigger, and apparently it's the earlier one that went to that was the smaller diameter. So that's not so great. But then I was thinking, well, if it's the same amount of teeth, dare I try and machine this down? In other words, if I turn this in the lathe and just took a cut and cut the ends of these teeth off a little bit, would it work? So, I'll take this pinion off, and oddly enough, the fact that this is not meshing with this very well, actually it's worked to my advantage. I think I can actually use that to help stop this from turning, so that it'll actually hold this, and I should be able to turn that. Alright, don't try this at home. I'm a professional hammer and chisel mechanic. In case you wonder what I'm doing, I'm pretty sure this is a left-hand thread. Problem is the whole thing's turning still. I guess that's not going to disengage once. I guess it's not going to stay locked on the shaft when I do that. So I think to get this off, I need to take the starter back off and get it on the bench. Well, now that I have this thing on the bench, a couple of things. If I roll the pinion up, I can actually see there's a nut cast. There's flanges on the back of the pinion, obviously for a wrench to go on here. Now, that little stinker right there apparently is 20 millimeter. I don't have a 20 millimeter wrench, which I'm kind of surprised, but I actually don't have a lot of the open-end wrenches in larger sizes. And then this one on the end is 17 millimeter, and by the way, I was able to look at this under magnification, and there's just enough thread protruding out so I can see that the thread actually is not left-handed. It is a regular right-hand thread. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. Oh man, I do not like the way that feels. God, that just feels like something's gonna break. Oh, I'll tell you what's happening. My wrench is slipping. Because like I just said, it's a 19 millimeter. Let's see. I wonder if I have a 13/16. Yep, I have a 13/16. Man, that's tight. I wonder if they use thread locker on that. Wouldn't be surprised. I'm beginning to think
that the purpose of this nut area on the bottom here is not to hold this to do what I'm trying to do. By doing this, I'm exerting a lot of force on the thread on the inside of here that engages this barber pole or very coarse threaded shaft that does this action here. So I think the way to handle this is going to be to take the starter apart so I can hold the inner part of the starter in a vise so it can't rotate. I'm going to make a mark on the label here where the M is, and a mark on the end caps to line up with the M. Video card's filling up again. The dropped down from 1080 to 720, so I've got like 2 minutes of video left here. So basically I just slid this out. The brushes are the kind that actually go on the end instead of riding on the, they actually ride against this instead of the other type that ride on a rotor. So now I can grip this in a couple of, I can put this in the vise and put some something in there to protect it, something soft, piece of brass or something, or copper, and I'll be able to grip this really tight, and then I'll use an impact wrench on this to get this off. Hey, what better thing to hold this than my chuck? This big 3-jaw chuck on the Vernon can actually handle that, which is great. So of course it's going to turn, so what I'm going to do is going to engage the back gear, but I'm not pulling the pin, and what that does is that effectively locks the spindle. Didn't need the impact driver after all. Gotta love it. Yeah, there's something on those threads, some kind of white stuff, some sort of thread locking material. Not so much that I had to put heat on it. So I get this little cap, spring. Now this just rotates right on off. I love it. Alright, it's going to be a little bit shaky, but now that I have the gear off, I can actually hold it right up and try and make the teeth mesh, only to discover that the spacing of the teeth is going to be completely wrong. So the problem is, and I should have realized this, that if I had a 10-tooth pinion gear that had a smaller diameter than this, that would cause the teeth to be closer together. Same amount of teeth, okay, in a smaller circle, teeth are going to be closer together. These teeth are spaced too widely apart. So if I just put this in the lathe and turned off the very ends of these teeth, it would not help my problem at all, and it would destroy this pinion. So that dog just ain't gonna hunt. Maybe if I go to the boatyard I could find one of these. Well, I hit the trail today trying to find either a used starter locally at one of the local or nearby Merc dealers, or see if they could help me with this problem, see if they had a pinion or something that I could change, swap out. But unfortunately they said, yeah, there's no way that's going to happen. One dealer was able to show me that he can get he can special order a pinion from another company, but he said the problem is, he said there's no guarantee that that pinion will fit my starter. It'll fit the aftermarket starter that his distributor sells. So that'd be taking a chance. And he said to make matters worse, it's not in stock at the warehouse. So he said it's $30 for the pinion, another $18 shipping because it'll be a special order. There's $48. I might as well just go and get myself another starter off of eBay, the correct number. So and I went down the road to a dealer that has a lot of used, older stock and inventory, and didn't have any luck there either. They offered to order me a new starter, but again, that's not going to do me any good right now. So figure if I'm going to have to wait for an order anyways, I might as well see if I can't find another deal online and just make sure that I get the correct one this time. So in the meantime, I'm going to put this one back together so that I can offer it to somebody who can use it maybe. So I'm gonna just I'm gonna put some Permatex blue on those threads, just because I do think that there's supposed to be some sort of a locking compound on there. And then I'll put the starter back together, test it one more time just to make sure it's a good working starter, and then we'll sell it. Alright, so just as a quick aside, rather than hold these for a flea market find series, just to talk about these today real quick. I hit the used tool store in lieu of the other day, realizing that I don't have any large sized metric wrenches, and just so happens on his latest video that he posted of what he had come in, he had some large wrenches. There was a 19mm too, but I've already got that one. So I got a Craftsman 20, a 22, and a 24, and $15 for the 3. So now I've got a few extra large sizes. Well, I'm glad I did make my witness marks here, because although there are a couple of little notches that have to line up for this to go on, there's 2 of them, so you can put this on 180 degrees around the other way. And whether or not that would be a problem, I don't know, but I don't want to find out. So I'm glad that I've made my mark here. Now on the tail cap end, I'm having a little bit of a problem here. These brushes that go on here, they're spring loaded, so it's going to be a little bit of a trick to put this on. But as luck would have it, I remember dealing with this exact same situation. This is exactly the kind of brush setup that the winch motor on the Yamaha Grizzly used. Why did I say used? Used. Uses. Whatever. Alright. It's still a little tricky, but it helps a lot. Make yourself a little jig. This is just a piece of flashing. And what you can do is like push in 2 of the brushes and kind of position this to hold. Oops. Like I said, it still takes a little bit of finagling, but it can be done. Alright, so just kind of keep a little bit of pressure on that. Push in this one. Push in this one. Slide the whole contraption forward. Might have to, let's see, this is going to be iffy here. This flashing isn't quite stiff enough to do this job. Oh, there we go. And then before you get it all the way seated, that spring force will pop this end cap right off, so you got to keep hold of it. Gently slide that out. Put that up. Keeping it vertical, I've got the weight of the starter actually holding this whole thing together. So here we go. It just clicked in. This one has come out a little bit. Okay, there we go. My lines all line up. Alright, better test it one more time before I slap it up on eBay. Alright, now I intentionally am not mounting the starter because I actually don't want to engage at all, because I know that that's a horse show, and all I'm going to do is grind up the end of this pinion, which so far, that little bit of testing I was trying didn't do anything critical to it. So I'm going to take this out and just rest it somewhere. Need to put it somewhere I can get kind of a grip on it. Yeah, that ain't good. Alright, let's see. This thing does have quite a bit of torque when it starts, so I want to make sure this thing doesn't yank out of my hand. Alright, that works fine. And this is going counterclockwise, so that means that the flywheel turns clockwise. Why is that important? Well, because it occurred to me I could probably turn this thing with my impact wrench to test the compression, so that I could test the compression without buying the new starter just yet. I'm just going to try a dry run here of using this to spin it. With all the spark plugs out, there should be very little resistance. It should spin fairly easily. I'm also curious whether or not anything flies out of these cylinders. I'm also curious whether or not there's going to be any bad metal on metal noises or clangings. Although I'm probably going to hear the impact driver ratcheting. That'll probably be loud enough to drown out minor things. Well, that's a lot harder to turn than I thought it would be. That ain't gonna work. Problem is, even with the spark plugs open, it still can build a little bit of compression. In other words, you can hear it sucking in and blowing out through those spark plug holes. Which I did the whole finger in the hole test there, and every one of them does that, so that's a good sign. So I'm confident I don't have any pistons with holes in them. I just wish I could do a compression test. And I could rotate it by hand, but that's not really a good, it's not really a, I mean, that would show me if I had like 0 compression in one cylinder, but I already know that's not the case from my finger test. If I had something else I could drive this with. I could put a big drill on there, but then the thing's going to want to torque out of my hands. Well, I know this isn't going to work, so I can take this off. Well, I was just looking around the shop here, and I do have some low-speed, high-torque drills. Like I got a 90-degree drill for, you know, it's like a hole hog for when you're doing plumbing or electrical work. So that probably would have enough torque if I could hold on to the thing without it ripping out of my hands. But the problem is I've got no way to put a socket on that. All my 3/8 sockets that I might be able to fashion some sort of a driver adapter bit for the drill. I don't have a 15/16 3/8 socket. The 15/16 sockets I have are all 1/2-inch drive. So I'd have to adapt from 1/2-inch drive down to a shank that I could drive, that I could chuck in the drill. Which, scratched my head, thought of a couple of different things, and nothing seemed to work out. So I think I'm going to have to shelve that idea and maybe just see if I can't find a cheap starter online. Well, I guess I can shift my attention back to tightening up the tolerance on that lathe spindle.